everyone, I'm Susie and I've lived here in Dijon, France for over 16 years now. On this channel I talk about life in France and personal finance. This week on CNN.com there was an article about an American couple, Joanna and Ed, who moved to France about a year ago, but they've had such a hard time that they decided to move back to the US. I'll link to the article below if you want to check it out. As someone who's called France home for over 16 years now, their story really resonated with me because I remember when I first arrived here as well. Those initial months can be incredibly tough, and I remember in the early days wondering if I had made a huge mistake. Even now, still today, sometimes I get incredibly frustrated. When I read that Joanna and Ed decided to leave after just 1 year, my heart sank because I know that the first year can be the hardest. I remember my own first year here or more was a blur of bureaucratic appointments, confusion, and frustration. It definitely took me a while, years I'd say, to feel like I was more or less settled in here. But I'm so glad I've stayed, and today I wanted to share some insights from my journey that might help others succeed where this couple struggled. First, how important is it to learn French before moving to France? Joanna mentioned not finding time to learn French due to being busy with moving tasks, and the article said that her husband Ed spoke some French. She obviously realized how crucial speaking French is, and I agree with her. But maybe she hasn't reached a level of proficiency that allows her to have meaningful interactions with people in French yet. I can absolutely see how this could be a struggle, especially for someone as sociable as Joanna says she is. Here's what I would recommend. Start trying to expose yourself to French and learning as much French as you possibly can before moving to France. It's incredibly easy now to have access to so many amazing resources in French, thanks to the technology that we have access to. I'm not saying that learning French is easy, but having access to material in French is. I'm an English teacher myself with over 20 years of teaching language experience, and I've been learning French for over 30 years. I've seen what works for me and for many other people in terms of language learning. Two things are necessary to make fast progress in language learning. Massive doses of exposure, preferably meaningful interactive exposure, and high levels of motivation. I don't doubt that Joanna and Ed are motivated to learn French, but I bet they just need exponentially more exposure than they've gotten so far. The U.S. State Department's Foreign Service Institute says that it takes between 600 and 750 hours of class to learn French, which I'd say is probably underestimating things, but at least it's a good jumping off point to give you an idea of how much time it will take. To get hundreds of hours of exposure, I would use a combination of all sorts of different types of resources. Online classes, Duolingo, podcasts like this One Thing in a French Day, which I used to listen to and I'm delighted to see is still going strong after all of these years. YouTube videos, French grammar exercises in a book like this one that I actually co-wrote about 1 million years ago, but I'm sure there's tons of other resources like this out there that are great as well. Apps like Quizlet and Anki and on and on. Another thing you can do is join conversation groups even before coming to France. I know that these exist all over the place as well, and it will give you a chance to practice speaking French with others who are also learning how to speak French. Basically, use whatever you like that's adapted to your level, vary the language skills that you're working on, make it part of your routine, and just don't give up. And then once you arrive in France, definitely continue your self-study, but you can also enroll in local classes. In another video here on my channel about how to move to France, I talk about a program that they have here in Dijon called the CEF that's affiliated with the local university. And at the CEF, they run intensive French language courses for a semester, for the school year, or for the summer even. And they're quite affordable, and I think that they are quite good as well. And I'm sure that similar programs like that exist all over the country too. And then just practice everywhere, even if you feel silly. French people, for the most part, will be gracious and patient with you as you practice your French with them. And when you arrive in France, you can try to find a language buddy. This is something that I did my first year living in France, even before I met my husband, and sort of fell into his pre-made social group and family circle. It was someone that I just sort of randomly met on the university campus one day. I think we struck up a conversation for whatever reason, just small talk, and the person could recognize that I wasn't French and figured out that I was a native English speaker and proposed this idea of meeting regularly to give me the chance to practice my French, and in exchange we would speak in English for half the time as well, so that he could have a chance to practice his English. And it was great. It was something that we really maintained throughout the entire first year that I was living in France, that we did regularly, and it was entirely free aside from the cost of a coffee in a cafe occasionally, and it was a win-win for both of us. So I definitely recommend this even to this day to my students. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky just to to kind of overcome that initial awkwardness when you meet someone. But it's definitely something that I would encourage you to do because many French people are looking to practice their foreign language skills if they're learning English or some other language that you might speak as well. And it will give you the chance to meet someone and meet with them regularly and get to know them and give you a chance to practice your French as well. Next, how can you make friends in France? This is where my heart really goes out to Joanna because, like I said, she mentioned that she's very sociable. And she also said in the article that she's only had meaningful conversations with her husband recently. Making friends here might be challenging, but it's not impossible. You could join a local association. Here in France, associations are often quite active. And in Dijon, I know, for example, that there is a really amazing variety of different types of associations. So just need to do some research and find something that sort of sounds interesting to you. And you can test it out and see and attend a few meetings and see if the projects that the association is working on are something that you're interested in. And that would give you a chance to meet some like-minded people and another chance to use your French as well. And you could even volunteer. There are so many amazing volunteer opportunities around as well. I know, for example, that I was just checking out this new thrift shop downtown and I saw that it's entirely staffed by volunteers. And I thought to myself, ooh, I wish I had more time. If I did, I would love to be involved in something like this. And it gives you a chance to, again, to meet people, interact with people, use your French, and feel like you're contributing something to the local community as well. Even something as simple as joining a gym can be a great way to meet people. I remember when I was in college during my semester abroad, I joined a gym, and one of the first days that I was there working out, there was a group of regulars there, and they were sharing a galette des rois, which is a traditional French king cake that they have in January, and they invited me to share it with them, and I was so pleased, but I didn't know the tradition, and then they started to tell me that I needed to go under the table, and I didn't understand. Of course, I thought I was misunderstanding what they were telling me to do, but that's the tradition. The youngest person has to go under the table and they get to determine who gets which slice because there's a hidden favor in one of the slices, and so that's the tradition, which I thought was just so funny. But again, it was just a great experience, and it made me feel like I had made a few friends or acquaintances at the gym, and then I was happy to see those people when I went back over the course of the semester. Expat groups or groups of English speakers or groups of your native language speakers can also be good resources as well, because you'll often have a chance to meet with people who have navigated some of those trickier bureaucratic obstacles, which I'll talk more about later. And it can be a great resource. I know that when I first arrived in Dijon, I would attend these potlucks for English speakers regularly, and it was a great way to meet people and to make some connections in the community. Another idea is to contact your local chapter of the association Accueil des Villes Françaises, or AVF. Their stated goal is to provide a support service for those who move to France for professional or personal reasons, giving them the means to quickly integrate into their new environment. And in fact, my husband and I were just at the market yesterday to shoot some footage for this video, and I saw that the local chapter of AVF had a table set up there, which makes me think that the Dijon chapter is quite active. So maybe your local chapter is active as well, and they could be a good resource for you too. And maybe just accept that French friendships may take a while to develop. But there was one thing in the article that she said that I actually disagree with. She said that she finds that French people are just not extremely social, and that just doesn't ring true to me based on my experience. My French family members and friends are extremely social. They love to spend hours together eating and hanging out over long, drawn-out meals. They love to celebrate milestones together and dance into the wee hours of the night and meet up for long hikes on the weekend and go on vacations together and what have you. So I definitely think, at least in my social circle, that the French people I know are very sociable too. Once my husband and I got together, I was really lucky because I was fully embraced by his entire social circle. So maybe that just goes to show how welcoming French people can be, or maybe I just got really lucky. Next, how can you deal with French bureaucracy? After 16 years here, I can confirm that the French bureaucracy has not gotten any simpler, but I have learned a few tricks along the way. First, I think it's a good idea to have both a virtual and a hard copy folder for all of your administrative documents, which you will need to access regularly. Next, I think it's great to have friends who have navigated the system so that you can ask them questions. And this is another place where expat groups can really come in handy, both virtual expat groups on Facebook, for example, and also real life expat groups, people that meet up regularly and friends that you may have in the city where you live. My first year living in Dijon was from 2001 to 2002, and I was a young college graduate and trying to navigate all of the bureaucratic hurdles with my pretty rudimentary level in French. And I felt like I spent a lot of time when I wasn't working just trying to take care of all of the sort of administrative things that I had to get done. And we had the internet back then, but still a lot of things had to be done either in person, which meant oftentimes waiting in long lines and then asking questions and getting responses that I didn't necessarily completely understand, or it meant calling people on the phone and either waiting on hold or getting a response that didn't necessarily fully make sense to me either. And so I just remember it being a long and confusing and frustrating process that involved a lot of trial and error. And I think back then I just had a pretty stoic attitude about it. I think I just kind of accepted that this is what I had to do. And luckily I had time in my schedule to sort of dedicate to just devoting to these types of things. And I also thought of it as a way of practicing my French as well. It gave me just another chance to try to figure things out and use my French in meaningful interactions. Years later, when my husband and I decided to get married, that was another complicated process. And then my driver's license could not be easily converted, so I had to repass my driver's license here in France, and that was another headache. And then applying for my series of carte de séjour, so residence permits over the years as well. I just remember that being very time consuming as well. And in fact, my last carte de séjour was a 10-year residency permit. And at some point during those 10 years, I became eligible for citizenship. And I just didn't even bother applying for citizenship until my carte de séjour was on the verge of expiring because I was not anxious necessarily, but I was just putting off having to take on all of that administrative, paperwork again, which I finally did. And now I'm French. I have French citizenship. That does not mean I'm immune from having to deal with French bureaucracy. However, it's still a pretty regular part of my everyday life. But I guess it's just something you learn to live with. And here's another tip that could come in handy depending on the circumstance. It is sometimes possible to get help navigating the system from a social worker. For example, when I was pregnant with my oldest son, I had been living and working in France at that point for a couple years, so I assumed that I was eligible for the famous French maternity leave benefits. And so I collected all of the documents that I thought were necessary for the application process, and I went down to the Assurance Maladie, the National Healthcare System office, and had a very unpleasant encounter with a misinformed civil servant who told me that no, in fact, I was not eligible for maternity leave benefits. And it just didn't seem right to me, didn't make sense. And I was really upset about it, actually. And I was talking about it with a friend who advised me to contact a social worker who might be able to help me. And I don't even think I ever met the social worker face to face. I think the social worker asked for copies of the documents that would justify that I did have the right to the maternity leave benefits. And I think we just dropped them off at this person's office. And I don't remember exactly how we got the whole thing sorted out in the end, but it was thanks to the help of the social worker that we figured out a solution. And in the end, I was, in fact, eligible for maternity leave benefits. Also, maybe it will help to remember that even French people struggle to navigate the French bureaucracy. Next, food shopping. How to shop like a local in France. About food shopping, I felt so bad when I read what Joanna said about not being able to find fresh produce. And in my head, I thought, oh no, Joanna. She mentioned only being able to find really sad, wilted celery, which is just so sad and unnecessary. It's true that some of those little superettes or épiceries, those little supermarkets in the city centers, don't necessarily stock the freshest produce or any produce at all. But that doesn't mean that it's not easy to find fresh produce. I don't know about Nîmes and Montpellier specifically, which is where Ed and Joanna have lived, but I think some of the following tips should work in most of France. The local markets are an amazing resource in terms of local and fresh products. And not just in the summer at the height of fruit and veggie season. My husband and I went to the market yesterday to shoot this footage just so I could show you how even in November, there's still plenty of local produce on offer. Granted, yes, it's a lot of carrots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, Jerusalem artichoke, cabbage, cauliflower, greens, herbs, seasonal stuff, but still, plus local eggs, meat, cheeses, yogurts, breads, and pastries, some even made with locally grown organic flours. The local market is a great resource for other fresh foods that are not necessarily local. For example, shellfish, fish, Italian and Spanish specialties, just to give a few examples. Plus, the local markets are often just an amazing experience. Ours was packed yesterday, filled with people shopping, chatting, just hanging out, seemingly enjoying themselves over this long November weekend. And we have another amazing system here in Dijon called the Drive Fermier. And in fact, it exists in other parts of France as well. And I have a whole video about this system on my channel as well, which I'll link to in the description below if you want to hear more about it. I just love it because it makes it really easy for people like me to log on. I have an account and I log on to the website and I place my order at the beginning of the week for all of the local products that I want to buy that week. And I order just the quantity I want and just the things that I need. I often order lentils, walnuts, eggs, yogurts, fresh fruit and vegetables, depending on the season. And I can drive through and pick up my whole order on Friday afternoons every week. And it just makes it convenient and easy and fun for local consumers like myself to have access to all of these amazing local products as well. The Drive Fermier system is unfortunately not available all over France, but there is another website called La Ruche qui dit oui, which is the same idea in essence. It's also trying to put local consumers in contact directly with local producers. And you can check out their website and see if you can find a ruche or a distribution center near where you live. And while you might need to head outside the city center to find one, there's another chain of markets called Grand Frais, and they sell beautiful fresh produce, some of which is imported, but it's also a great resource as well for fresh food. We do a weekly shop at Grand Frais to buy produce that's not available through the Drive Fermier. So there you have it. Lots of ideas for places that you can buy fresh produce, hopefully some of which will be convenient for you. So finally, is moving to France worth it? To Joanna and Ed and anyone else who may be struggling with your first few months or years here in France, I totally get it. There were absolutely days in those first few years when I was living in France where I would get so frustrated. And I still occasionally have those days, believe me. But overall, I'm really grateful that I've stayed. And if you're someone who is considering moving to France, please don't let this one couple's experience discourage you. Instead, I think we should take the lessons from this interview and try to learn from them. And I think that's probably why they agreed to be interviewed for this article. Take time to prepare, give yourself plenty of time to work on your French before you arrive in France. And, just be patient with yourself and remember that the process is going to take a long time. And if you're like me, it's probably going to take several years or longer even before you really start to feel like you're settled in and you're starting to feel like you understand what's going on around you and you know how the system works. France definitely is not perfect, but then again, no place is. But with proper preparation and realistic expectations, it can become a great home. It did for me, and it can for you too. If you're thinking about moving to France and wondering how much it would cost, you can check out this other video that I'll link to, which is a breakdown of our family's real budget. And if you'd like to learn more about Dijon, the city where I've lived since 2008, I'll link to another video here as well. Thank you so much for watching today, and until next time, à bientôt!